Assalamu alaikum. My name is Fadwa Wazwaz. I wanted to continue with the theme, speaking truth to power. This is under the section in my book, God Intervenes Between a Person and Their Heart. And it comes from a chapter on lessons on power and oppression from Moses. What you see on the screen is because when I am doing my writings, these individuals, I like to name names, like individuals like Yasmin Mogahed, Yaqeen Institute, and others, instead of being honest that they took my writings and my research and my thoughts and my ideas and started to build upon it their own institutes. They're running around doing this game of claiming that it's the other way around. It's the other way around, that I am benefiting from their information, even though you have evidence of writings and work and thoughts and research before they even were, like anyone even knew their name. Nobody knew of Yasmin Mogahed, so I am sharing here just one piece as I continue my work. But one piece, it's right here. This here, way 2008, December 26th. And the reason I'm sharing this is because there's others earlier than this, but this group, Minnesota Writers, is a group that had individuals who are very close to Al-Maghrib, Yaqeen Institute, Yasmin Mogahed, Imam Suhaib, they're very close to them. So they know my writings. They have evidence of my writing. And you would ask them for feedback. Because another reason I use in this one email is because they say, oh, she doesn't like to take advice. You literally go and ask them for feedback. But they don't want you, they like your writings, but they don't want you to be promoted with those writings. They want to take those writings, give it to Yasmin Mogahed, put her on stage, celebrate her, promote her for someone else's works. And even though they don't even understand the writings because they don't reach out for clarification or anything, they turn around and claim that this is their work instead. In any case, I just took a snip because I wanted to hide my email, as I'm getting a lot of trashy email from individuals who are, again, one of the ways that they are responding is they claim this is their writing, but then they try to smear you, to discredit you so that no one believes that the writings that are out there are mine. But this is my work. This is my research. They don't want anyone to believe that. They want people to believe that that's their work. They were the ones who were on the front lines doing this, and I stole their work. They went to the extent, just to kind of like create a situation, they would send me links to their PDF files, like to their work. Even though like you see their stuff online, like their videos and stuff, you don't agree with how they see things, and you let them know openly, like, I don't even agree with your analysis of how the Quran reconciles with itself and the way you extract understanding that's that's very contradictory with the way the Quran says things, and you correct them more than one time. Instead of them seeing that as a sign that I did my own research and I know what I'm talking about, they turn around and they up the smear campaign, and they come up with more smears and more smears and more smears. But it further reinforces my perception that they're not qualified as teachers, they're not qualified as leaders, they're not qualified to be on stage. So while we call out Trump and we call out Kamala Harris, there are also members in our community that really need to step down. They're just not qualified. In terms of knowledge, they're not qualified. In terms of character, they're not qualified. If your response to someone saying, this is my research, this is my work, you're taking it, is to smear them and then to go on and pretend that, no, this is your work. Well, I've asked you for a simple question. Here's one that was sent to people of your group, dated 2008, which found itself in your book, Reclaim Your Heart. You took it and you just, fixed it a little bit, polished it up, and you claimed it as your own. You came on the scene in 2010. That's when people started promoting you. It was around 2011, 2010. That's when people started to promote you. And that's when you came up with your book around 2012, the very first version of your book. But then before that, there's really I can't, if I go online, I don't see my writings, which were shared to members of your group, who have links to your group, ever materializing. I don't see your writings predating mine anywhere that mention what I have been discussing. To continue, so I'll move this snippet, just I wanted to show the date. This is where I began. So again, it's right here. So I was writing either Islamic worldview, and now you see she kind of touched on that in her book. She just took that article, put it in her book, and started to polish what I wrote. I was going between power, weakness, power, protection, power, and oppression. I finally ended up with power and oppression. So I share some information. Another reason I like this particular piece is some of the criticism also coming my way is that if you see somebody who has more knowledge, you're supposed to give preference to that person who has more knowledge. And so they share a saying by Sheikh Sharawi. And I do agree with that, by the way. I tend to be somebody who believes if you love knowledge, then you should, if somebody of knowledge has the same understanding, then you should give preference for them to share that because of the fact that more qualified. And so you shared always, whenever you share your writings, you would share like names of people who have more knowledge than you, as an acknowledgement that you do agree that, yeah, people who have more knowledge should be promoted ahead of those who don't have knowledge. It's simple. Like if you're going to be doing any like health issue, you would want somebody who has more knowledge on that particular issue than somebody who has less knowledge. But there's the issue of the humility that sometimes I mentioned that with my mom's surgery, when sometimes people cannot recognize the lack of humility in a particular situation. So here I mentioned, and you saw this again in Yasmin Mogahed's book. She just grabs exactly this particular piece. You see it right there in her book. And then she claims that I stole her writings. Just complete, again, Darvo just cannot accept that she was nowhere on the scene. And she just literally, came behind the scenes, told her what to say, took my writings because they didn't like me. And then they told her, here, you just promote you with that writing. So talks about here, my Lord said to the angels, I will create a vicegerent on earth. They said, will thou place therein one who will create mischief therein and shed blood, while we do celebrate thy praises and glorify thy holy name. He said, God said, I know what you know not. So one of the teachers that I mentioned is here because he was doing a talk here. And so I said, okay, I will go ahead and reference a teacher that also understands, follows along this understanding of power versus the time, as I said, I was going power, weakness, power, oppression. I leaned toward power and oppression when I started reading more into reflecting more into the story of Moses. Human beings are God's chosen vicegerents on earth. Despite the reality we are witnessed by the angels, we make mischief and shed blood. God still had a good opinion of humanity. God did not negate that human beings might commit corruption, but what he did affirm was the divine wisdom for that human being to be on earth. He discussed how religion that came from God came to guide humankind as well as solve their problems. However, as we have seen, and I will mention, for example, a post, and it isn't again exclusively, but sometimes we have to be aware that religion is used to create the problems. So the teacher says the congregants try to have a responsibility to establish religion as part of the solution and not part of the problem. So we need to respect the differences between us. So I've been writing on these issues, but again, you gave preference and you gave the video where he discusses this, a common word. And it was meant to be like an interfaith where we're discussing about turning religion from causing the problems. Because, when you have a disease in your heart, you could use water. It doesn't have to be religion, use it to poison people, kill people. Or you could use water to benefit people. So water is essential for people. You can't live without water. But the fact that is some people with a poisonous spirit can't use water and turn it into poison. I wanted to proceed about the issue of here, power and oppression. Notice that when the angels questioned God, they also bore witness to what they saw. But notice how, again, God responded. The angel said that these human beings, they make mischief and shed blood. How could they be vicegerents on earth? And God says, I know what you know not. So oftentimes we think that the way that God, again, disciplines, nurtures, facilitates, unfolding of reality is by taking someone and putting them, in prison. And this, it opens the doors about, again, other chapters of my book, but just here to reflect on healthy power. Talking about here, people witness something, angels, they're pure, they're not, projecting anything, they're pure, they cannot sin. So they're saying, but they make mischief and they shed blood. The passage is an interesting passage for many reasons. It illustrates that good and bad are not images. And this is where I get into discussions on why do bad things happen to good people. Now, again, she also grabbed that discussion and went off with it, which is fine, but she did not push that in our community. I was the one who pushed it in our community. There are many underlying dimensions that we cannot see. In later passages, God also says, if God were to take mankind to task for what they've earned, he would not leave a living creature on the face of the earth. But he reprieves them to an appointed time, and when their term comes, then surely they will know that God is ever aware of his slaves. And I mentioned this again with the ego and the nafs, and I gave Sheikh Sharawi regarding this particular verse. The teacher explains in his speech that God veils us when we commit many things. He doesn't expose people. He brings that information to you one-on-one. And I mentioned that with Sheikh also Ramadan al-Buti. So he doesn't come out publicly and he doesn't try shame. When it gets into a position of where you're warned, and you're given information, you expose yourself. You openly start to not just rationalize, but celebrate the very sins that you recognize are wrong. You'll come out an example of that. Anthony Blinken will come out and say bombing hospitals, Russia bombing hospitals is not normal. It shouldn't be normal. It has to be stopped. So the values he recognizes conscientiously, he knows this is wrong. So it's not like he's ignorant. He knows this is wrong. Now you toss in where Israel is committing these crimes, then he starts with the rationalizations and the, defense, but it goes worse in that the arms, they fund, they defend, they give political cover. So in that situation, you're not, God had already given you sufficient knowledge to know that something is wrong and not to do it. And if you're now doing it publicly and you're defending it and you're celebrating in the sense that you're going out of your way to defend and promote it as just, then now you're actually exposing yourself. So you revealed yourself by yourself. And it is difficult for us when the masks fall off. Now, he had a different understanding of this. But he's saying that if God was to expose us, we would have a hard time sitting with each other. And meaning, like, if God was to expose all our faults and shortcomings. I took it as if the mask starts falling off, it is difficult for us to live with each other. And I like Sheikh Ashar Ali, who said that if one group repents and another doesn't repent, and it's just based on this understanding that all of people have faults and shortcomings and issues. But if one side repents and the other side doesn't repent, the one that doesn't repent makes the life of the one that repents miserable. So this is how it's like, good or bad is simply good repents, bad doesn't repent. Good feels remorse, bad doesn't feel remorse. This is how it is understood in Islamic theology. Good repairs the harm, accepts accountability. Bad doesn't repair the harm, doesn't accept accountability. Good takes warnings, takes measures to go in the right direction. Bad, just ignores the warnings and keep bulldozing through. So this is how it's understood. God doesn't define us by our personal feelings or our flaws based on this understanding that what good and what bad. It's not images, but by our potential. So both people can be committing, for example, the same sin. They're right here. Good decides to repair the harm, remorse, take warnings, prevent it next time. Bad does not. They just continue to justify, rationalize, and bulldoze through. So this is how it's seen, that God sees our potential. When we connect to God, not fall, but when we connect to God, we humans have the potential to rise at a higher station before God than even the angels. Although God is aware of the human flaws and potential to do mischief and shed blood, He gives continual opportunities for an appointed time to nurture, cultivate, guide the human being to a higher station. Furthermore, people are sometimes allowed to sin to humble them or to test them or others. And the key thing here is the humility. And then, because let's just say, as I choose the example of Anthony Blinken, and it could be also Hillary Clinton. You recognize certain things is wrong. You're going on with the Russia campaign. This is wrong. This is wrong. This is wrong. But this knowledge does not carry with humility. You're not humble. You're not carrying this knowledge with humility. So God knows that you're not carrying it with humility. And so you're tested now when you're asked, with the knowledge that you claim, given here an example, to speak up as ferociously as you did when you spoke up here. And so when Israel is bombing hospitals, killing healthcare workers, killing journalists, on and on and on, everything that you've condemned, because you're carrying this knowledge or these common values with pride and arrogance, when you're tested, you fail the test because pride does not allow you to recognize your state of being. You're just carrying knowledge like dead weight. You're just carrying it like dead weight. You know that this is wrong. You recognize that it's wrong. It's not like you're ignorant. It's not like you didn't know. You know it's wrong. You know hostage taking is wrong. You know killing Palestinians is wrong. Then October 7th happens. And suddenly it's like, instead of coming to the realization that, we were taking hostages, now we know what, taking hostages feels like. We need to stop. We need to repent. We need to feel remorse. What is happening? Instead of going toward the road of humility, they up the pride and they bulldoze through with the pride. So many an act of disobedience produce brokenness is better than one act of obedience with pride. This didn't come from that lesson, but I sometimes weave my lessons together. So a person who sins and repents is closer to God than someone who does a good deed and does not give thanks or sees his piety and looks down on others. Have you ever slipped? So there's a difference between like slipping and between falling. I don't agree, as I said, with the fall. Sometimes I'll use it to recognize that some people make that discussion, but it's a slip. Like you have your values. Bombing hospitals is wrong. You see the violations, bombing hospitals. You may have been supporting, for example, Israel. That's considered, if you will, kind of like a slip, because if you've been supporting Israel, you're not aware of the violation that's taking place. You kind of like accepted whatever it is that they were saying. But now things are all out in the open. Another way of violating your values. And again, people are always looking at it in terms of going south. It could be that, that saying like swear words is wrong. And then you said it. You said it unintentionally. Now, it could be you're giving people a taste of their own medicine, but that's not considered a slip. But in any case, we all will have values and we unintentionally engage in them. It's not deliberate. The slip is really something where it's neglectful, but it's not deliberate, planned, premeditated. You're trying to blow up a hospital, for example. It's unintentionally. You may have been supporting, Israel. You recognize, though, that blowing hospital is wrong. Now it's become out in the open. You're not going to openly premeditatedly, intentionally support. So you know that this is wrong, you're going to stop. A slip is, again, you didn't know. You were not following the news for the past 100 years of what Israel is doing. You were neglectful of, what's right and wrong in the Middle East. You were supporting Israel, promoting Israel, thinking, it's the greatest thing, the greatest democracy in the Middle East. But you support the idea that bombing hospitals is wrong, bombing, healthcare workers is wrong, bombing journalists is wrong. But the slip here is that you were neglectful. You were just engaging in sin unintentionally, unknowingly. That's considered a slip. That's what happened with Adam upon and peace. Do you stop and reflect on the triggers? Like, what made it so that you're just supporting without reflecting? And it has to do with the fact, again, I mentioned that with the celebrities, the distractions, wanting to fit in with the crowd, You know, everybody's supporting Israel. Famous people are supporting Israel. Celebrities are supporting Israel. Do you reflect on how you slipped into this violation of values? You stop and reflect on how did we get to where Israel is able to do all of this, you know, massive like genocide that's taking place in Gaza. How did we get there? Because there has to have been, you know, a lot of this taking place. And here we're talking about unintentional. I'm not talking about the ones who are premeditated. I'll get to them. But we're talking about here the unintentional, unknowing. You just want to fit in with the in crowd. You know, it's kind of like Kamala Harris being on stage, the vibe, the placebo, joy, and you want to belong with that. You want to be part of that crowd, that celebrities. Taylor Swift gave her, you know, endorsement. You want to be part of that. You don't want to be like the person who's like not following the crowd and having to like spend time, effort, energy, reading a book, listening to stories of what is happening. Have you ever looked back and thought, what was I thinking when I was advocating for this and that? What was I thinking? Like when I was sitting here advocating, Israel was, you know, the best country in the Middle East. You stop and recall the contributions to your growth. Like what caused the shift? I just did a video about the magicians where they went from one and they went to the other shift. What caused the shift in your growth? You recall how you could, you know, what contributions made you like see things differently, changed your worldview. Recently, like one journalist, I hope I'm not mispronouncing his name, Tahi Quotes, I believe Quotes is how he says it. I don't like people mispronouncing his name, so I like to make sure I don't mispronounce people's names. But he said when he went to visit, you know, it sort of like changed his whole worldview, just completely changed his worldview. So what contributed to his growth? He has also an experience. He has knowledge of values. Probably maybe in the past, I haven't went too much into it, was slipping in the sense that he probably was promoting Israel as the greatest democracy and everything. But then when he went and saw it, he woke up. So here again, it's about a slip. Unintentional, unknowingly, he has experiences of Jim Crow and other persecution towards African Americans. So he's here and he's recognizing the contributions. He saw, he heard testimony, he witnessed it by himself. But he recognized he had values. He recognized this, what I'm witnessing, is wrong. This, what he was supporting before, was a slip, unintentional, unknowing, nothing premeditated. There was like, you know, he was kind of just ignorant of what is really on the reality screen. And so here, when he goes and visits, then you see the contributions to his growth. Now he takes a different worldview because he has a value system. He has a value system and he like speaks about that and vocalizes it very strongly. So this is, again, someone who shifted in terms of that. He still had that value system. Now imagine someone, you know, weak without a support group. Here I'm referring to people who, he's a journalist who are not journalists, but people, again, they don't have support groups. They have lack of resources, coping skills. They're looked down upon in a cocktail of ignorance. The reason I mention this is a lot of time when we're speaking truth to power, we're going after the little guy. And sometimes I see videos of that, and I would just discourage people from going after the little guy. We're not interested in the individuals who have lack of coping skills, are looked down upon, social economic injustice, miseducation, poverty, and the like, to that experience. Ask yourself, what's the possibility that some in such a situation will be swayed in the wrong direction? We're not, I see sometimes memes always focus on those with power, with knowledge. They speak out very clearly their value system. They say this is what their values are. Like they'll speak about the Holocaust, the dehumanization of people. They speak about the ladder of, dehumanization. They tell you their value system. Because here then you have to identify when, the slip is again that they're ignorant of their contributions to the situation. But when something Israel is doing, you condemn Russia for doing, then it says that it's not a slip. It's premeditated, intentional, knowledgeable, like you are using knowledge not to grow, but you're using knowledge as a tool of oppression. Even like knowledge such as blowing up hospitals is wrong. You're using it, so you're not really like trying to solve the problem with the issue of between Russia and Ukraine, because when Israel does the exact same things, then you start to support and you start to give, arms and funding, and you even want to now go and send troops to the Middle East to try to even engage in warfare. That's going to impact all of us. So this is now, it goes into the issue of arrogance and pride. That's what I'm trying to get at. And then that they don't really have a value system. What they have is their desires, is their value. Okay, so I just tried to explain like a difference between a slip, but these are your values, but you slipped. But sometimes those are not your values. Those common values, those shared values, they're not really your values. Your values are money, gain, power, dominance. Your values is to be judge, jury, executioner, castigator. That's your value. Your value is to be a god. That's your value. And so we have to understand that so we can understand what it is we are fighting. And there has to be more than one approach to speaking truth to power. When in the past, I would not make a judgment of who's this or who's that. You would tell people very similar to this journalist to go visit overseas. The situation is as clear as day. Some would return back and they recognize the situation was very, very difficult. They did not say any of it was wrong. You gave them many connections. You gave them individuals who were, for example, it was rabbis for human rights and other connections there to try to let them know this is not a religious issue. This has to deal with Zionism. It's a movement that aims to dispossess Palestinians from their homeland. And so when they came back, it wasn't like they disagreed with what thing, the facts on the ground as they saw it. But they felt like, was one journalist told me, if he was to speak about this, then he could be attacked. So he said he could not speak about this because he would be attacked. And the sacrifices that they needed to make, they were not willing to make those sacrifices. Some journalists that did speak up, they were attacked, and some lost their jobs. But again, the difficulty that they were facing was they knew for them to report just exactly what they witnessed, not to even add any commentary, they would be attacked heavily. And as we are witnessing right now in Gaza, when journalists came out in the open and they presented what the facts are on the ground, we saw how many number of journalists were killed. So this is again about bearing witness that truth spreads through sacrifice. And they're just standing up and speaking, they were killed. Now, it didn't need to get to that situation where so many journalists are getting killed. Didn't need to get to that situation. But what got us there was too many journalists recognized they were going to be criticized heavily. And they took the side of they did not want to make any sacrifice. They might lose advancements, they might lose getting a higher position, and they were not willing to make that sacrifice. So because too many people, again, you could say that slip of violations, but too many people, after being educated, after recognizing the situation, did not wish to make any sacrifice. They wanted to be part of the placebo vibe joy group. They wanted to be part of that, hype. And they refused to make any, it was so warm, that they would even say a little word. And they did not wish, that's how we got here. As they say, trying to reflect on the word that they say evil prevails something when good people do nothing. What you needed to do, know what you needed to say, and they refused to say it all. So just allowing even a Palestinian to say it, as Coates mentioned, they would not even hire a Palestinian who says, I could probably deal with the heat and the attacks and the criticism, but put me on stage. They would not allow a Palestinian to be on stage to say. So it came to, again, the more that they refused to sacrifice, refused to make any attempts to allow the truth. This is how we came closer and closer and closer to genocide, and individuals that could have just faced heat, criticism, but had to actually bear witness to the truth with their lives. Talking about the journalists, and they had to bear witness to the truth, knowing that they were going to be killed. May sound difficult given that what we've experienced in life. I like to always give credit where credit is due. And I wish Yasin Mogahed would have the dignity and self-respect to give credit that she benefited from my writings. And she took the writings and put it in her book. But that's a struggle for her. It may sound difficult given all that we've experienced in life, but we have to know that what has happened to us and those around us is direct result of not living for God. Remember I said, for God, by God, with God. Not the other way around. This is referring to the religion can be the source of problem. But just like water, people can poison it and harm you. You can't live without water. The idea is to remove the poison. The idea is to drink water without the poison. But not to say because someone puts poison in the water, we need to dump religion and we don't need religion at all. It's like saying we don't need water because someone puts poison in the water, well, then you're going to die. So our spirit needs religion. We just need to recognize when somebody put poison and turned religion into a source of a problem instead of a source of a solution and nurturing and protection for our well-being. It means more than just asking God to make things different. It means a dedicated heart that realizes we have no power and that all power resides with God. It means that He's showing us His clear signs that to live lives of injustice without mercy, as the angels bore witness from all of humanity, not a particular group, is to live in opposition to God's love and mercy, which is enough to earn His wrath and punishment. And it means that each of us needs to first return to God with a pure heart before we can hope to help those around us change. We don't need to wait for anyone else. We must take the first step because we are the one that has been given this awareness and insight. Many of us are actually in denial of what's happening around us. You know, as I said, when you witness things that are happening, you have the choice to bear witness to it, as Coates did. Says, you know, look, this is what I've seen, or you can deny it. Because you recognize if I bear witness, there's going to be a loss. And so you think it, you calculate and you say, I'll deny. We believe things should be different. We can't accept it. But until we do accept it, we recognize there's a genocide taking place, try to understand it and change it, at least within ourselves. It has to go through the point of we have to hate it, recognize it, it's bad, it's wrong. Then continue. Again, if we don't do anything, then we will continue to keep, again, burning and not being able to do anything about it, which gets into the issue of hatred. That's another issue about hatred is really about you have something, you recognize it's wrong, but you're not learning the response that you need to take to change that particular response. This is a way of looking at hatred. It's about not growing. Remember I said how we both start out here. Instead of growing, like you look how to grow, how to understand, how to figure things out, how to change, what things in society need to change. You go the road of just hating it. And hatred kind of comes from denial, by the way. You're denying what you're witnessing in a sense that you're not able to accept that this is what is taking place. And that shouldn't happen. What kind of life is that? Do we really have any other choice? Surrender yourself to his love, mercy, and wisdom. It's easier said. I'm sitting here on a screen in a comfortable home and I'm saying it and other people are being bombed. I'm not in any way dismissing the pain, the issue of what they're going through. But stop seeing everything as the way you want it to be and start trying to understand things, seek knowledge and insight so you can understand what's happening so that we're not in that slipping mode, as I said. You're not neglectful. You're recognizing there's a genocide taking place. You're learning, you're educating yourself, you're educating others. You're making sure that people are aware so that we can start to build a movement that starts to then put pressure and help people to end the genocide. Start living life for the sake of knowing, worshiping, and serving our Creator, and start fulfilling our life's purpose and potential. To those who are strong and have power, we remind them not to look down on those who are weak. Like, don't look down on those. For example, if someone is going through a genocide, don't be sitting here and saying, okay, they're not responding like Prophet Muhammad, upon him, peace and blessings. Because a lot of times when people are going through a trial, some individuals who are not going through a trial, instead of, being grateful that they're not in that trial, but asking God what they could do to help those who are in the trial, they're running around pointing at all the flaws and personal shortcomings that they see that the person responded to this trial. This is literally how Yasmin Mogad and her group function. We further remind them not to define the weak by their flaws and their personal failings, sending them a message that they are worthless. They can never get things right because that's what oppression is. It keeps letting you know that, you made this mistake, that mistake, you have this, you have that. In reality, the power and strength they possess is a test to see if they will give thanks to God. We further remind them of the humility and the gratitude of Prophet Suleiman, on him peace. Prophet Suleiman was given a gift of power and kingdom that no other human being had. When he was passing, an ant ran, fear of being crushed by him. He heard the speech of the ants and smiled. Now, this is his response to seeing an ant. He responded with a prayer to God. I end with this prayer of Prophet Simeon. It's a prayer that shows his humility, his connection to God, and his sincere gratitude for the good works he does and his gifts that he has. He seeks the source of gratitude. Doesn't say, I am grateful, but he turns to God seeking gratitude to fulfill also the requirements of power and influence given to him by God. It gets into the issue that we are facing right now, like two candidates who are being promoted as the only candidates for presidency. Both of them lack the character and the knowledge necessary for the position of a nation of superpower, both candidates. And I mention this because sometimes you have to put, they say, the mirror in someone, and the mirror is always about not the negative, because people are always like, they'll send me like, just to show you like some of the games that some people here play. Like you'll say something and then they'll send you somebody doing some weird things. And they're like, that's the mirror. That's who you are. Like, I don't even know this person and that's who that person is, but you're not putting a mirror or reflection of who I am. You're sending somebody to play a game, role play some character that someone told you I was, which I was not, but that's not how you put a mirror in someone's face. You speak truth to power. You put a mirror in someone's face to help them reflect on who they are. Like with Kamala Harris, I put Filkis to show, look how she responded. She wasn't reading a script. Like she reached out for advice, which is normal for her to reach out for advice from the Biden administration. But she made her own decisions. She showed that she is qualified and capable to be a queen and to make her own decisions. She wasn't somebody who was put in a role, surrounded by a bunch of psychopaths. And they're telling her, here, read from this script. And she just followed without her own intelligence, her own thought processes, her own reasoning. Bilkis decided to take her own path. She listened, she reflected, but she decided on her own path. She wanted to meet with Solomon. Likewise, I tell again to those in power that there are requirements to the seat of power and influence. There are requirements. All the prophets of God, when they had power and influence, they were not speaking like I mentioned Netanyahu was speaking. He will crush the weak and he will, make alliances with the strong. So they were not like power hungry, God-like image hungry type personalities. His prayer was, and this is what I will end with, oh my Lord, order me. And I use the word order. It could be enable, facilitate. Again, with the Quran, you look at more than one translation. He's seeking grace from God so that I may be grateful. It doesn't say I am grateful and then turn around to someone else and say, you are not grateful. But he says, order me that I may be grateful. So he's seeking gratitude. Seeking the gift and the grace of gratitude, what? For the power and influence. Why? Because when you get it from God, when you look at someone who may not have power and influence, you will not seek to crush them. Again, you have to reflect on that, because when people reach that state of crushing people and blowing up people, if they're seeking something like, a power or a prestige, but divorced from God. They're trying to be a God. And I mentioned about the mercy and his wisdom and his loving nature, but because it's divorced from God, what happens is they don't seek the gratitude that comes with this power and influence. They don't even seek like how to fulfill the need, thy favors which thou hast bestowed on me and my parents, and to work the righteousness. They don't even assume to know, like, I know what to do. They're turning to God here in Prophet Suleiman. Very powerful, very influential. He's seeking from God that I may work the righteousness. So he's seeking grace to do the right actions for his sake. That will please you. And he doesn't even just stop there. It's a very beautiful prayer. The righteousness that will please you, and admit me by your grace. Not by the righteous that I've done that pleased you, but admit me by your grace to the ranks of your righteous servants. So that humility, the knowledge, power, the influence carried with humility. It's essential to reflect on this mirror that I'm putting out there so that we can use it to judge those candidates. It's essential to reflect on this mirror that I'm putting before you. I'm not going into their closet, for example, searching through, trying to find some whatever. I don't need to know that, or telling someone, oh, I'm going to humiliate you, take off their clothes and say, aha, you've got genitals. Just stupid. But this is what you put before them. Is this who you are? You claim to love Prophet Suleiman. You claim to love Prophet Moses. Is this your nature? Is this your spirit? We hear what you're saying out in the open. Reflect on those God gave power and influence. And it was, again, coupled with, it's a healthy power. It was coupled with mercy, compassion, remorse. Reflect on that. Is that who you are? Because I mentioned in the previous video about the magicians and Moses. And the magicians and, the Pharaoh. So now we know also here, Prophet Suleiman. When we're witnessing, speaking truth to power, are those in power or seeking power, seeking candidacy? Is this their reality? Is this the voice that comes out of them? So as I'm looking at this is again Prophet Suleiman. I'm going to look for that post and show it to you that I'm referring to about when religion becomes the problem. Not too far. Let me just find it on my profile. There it is. Let me put this up again. It's this one right here.
In the Gaza Strip. Who will stay? Jews. If you want to call it cleansing, if you want to call it apartheid, you choose your definition. I choose the way to protect the state of Israel. Africa is big. Canada is big. The world will absorb the people of Gaza. How we do it? We encourage it.
Palestinians in Gaza who wish to remain in Gaza, are you saying they should be forced to go?
Palestinians in Gaza, the good ones, will be enabled. I'm not saying forced, I say enabled because they want to go.
If they don't want to go?
No, they want.
If they don't?
The Arabs want to go.
If they don't want to go?
They want to go.
If they don't, what happens?
The normal people don't want to live in hell.
What you're talking about sounds like a plan for ethnic cleansing.
You can call it ethnic cleansing, you call it the refugees.
Okay. So normal people, so they're gonna make life hell for people and say that normal people, it's a good aha moment, don't want to live in hell. So she came to a really good, in a distorted way, she came to a good realization, which is normal people don't want to live in hell. What she's failing to realize is when you're acting like a criminal, you're heading into the road that leads to hellfire. So if she would just reflect, the issue with people who engage in Darvo and projection is that because they're not reflecting, they're not realizing that sometimes the realizations that they come to, all they have to do is just reflect on it for themselves. Normal people don't want to live in hellfire. When you're acting like a criminal, you are heading to hellfire. So here's again, religion abused. Religion being poisoned with ideas and thoughts that totally are in contrast. They're totally contradictory to religion, to the spirit of religion. And it's being used to create the problem, nurture the problem in the region. And as I mentioned, where did I go? Here. If you reflect on her voice, and here, Prophet Suleiman, I mentioned, others, but I will continue with the issue about speaking truth to power. When you want to put the mirror to people in power who are oppressors, you find those who are not oppressors, and you put that mirror before them. You don't go in their bedroom and say, or, say, like the Israeli soldiers do, take off their clothes and then show, I humiliated you. No, you humiliated yourself. Why'd you take off their clothes? What do you look like underneath your clothes? You got genitals, these got genitals. Doesn't make sense. It's stupid. But you humiliated yourself. But the way you put the mirror in oppressor's face is you put what a healthy person in power and influence, how they think, how they interpret things, how they understand, how they perceive, how they relate, engage with people. That's the mirror that you put before them. Why? Because when they're looking at something that is healthy, and they're sitting here saying, I want to crush the weak, I want to, blow up this, and I want to be the most lethal force in the world. You put what a healthy person with power, Prophet Suleiman had power that no human being, not even the US, will ever have, an influence. What such an individual sounds like, how they engage and interact with people. You put that in their face so that they could see the ugliness of their character. So I just wanted to mention that when people are engaged in Darvo, I mentioned this, the first word is listen, so the emphasis here is on listening. Someone who's not willing to listen will be stuck in their mind forever. So they'll be stuck in alternate reality. They will never come out of alternate reality. So again, this was written in 2008. There are other versions of it earlier. Started off with power and protection because we all want protection. We wanted protection from what is taking place at this possession and what is happening in the world. But something for us, again, to reflect on as we are proceeding. And just a word to those individuals who are denying. Again, there's a lot of evidence that I have, that I have about the date. I was going to put it like this. I have about the dates that predate any of the books you've written, but more importantly, that all of this reached people who are very connected to your organizations. And the writings, I know, reached you because the exact same article ended up in your book, which predated your writings and predated your book. In fact, you were not even around in the public square anywhere at this time. And I met your sister when she came to town. She really did not have anything other than her taking surveys. She really had no critical thinking to speak of. I noticed like a lot of times when I would write something, she would just take that and use it and claim it and say that that was her thoughts and that was her understanding. And I could show those articles as well too. Even the criticism of Urshid Manji and others. She literally just took my critique of Urshid Manji and claimed it herself. So, pride. The evidence is there. You can either accept it and accept that you took someone's writings and promoted them as your own, or you can keep kissing up to famous sheikhs and they can come to your defense as, you know, and the truth, when we don't like it, or, you know, people who are not normal will look for agreement from others to try to come to their aid and help and promote something else, someone else's work and research as their own. So I thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.